Hi, I'm Claire Williamson, an ex-litigator and the co-founder of Leading Minds. With 97% of lawyers complaining that stress is impacting their health, I think that it's time that we actually speak about how challenging the pressures of the legal industry can be. So this podcast is a space where lawyers can discuss how they've overcome the challenges they face in their role and gone on to thrive within their career. Whether you're a trainee, a partner, or anyone in between, I really hope that this podcast is going to leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and with the confidence that you can leave your mark on the legal industry. And today I'm really excited to be joined by Lucy Cole, who is studying at the University of Exeter, and she's the founder of the blog Lucy Does Law. So today she's going to be speaking to us about how to avoid falling into the trap of comparing yourself to your peers. So thank you so much for joining me, Lucy.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. I thought it might be really good for our listeners, just for you to give a little introduction to yourself and where you're currently at, where you're studying. And I know that you're in the process of doing online vacation schemes as well. So if you want to tell us a little bit more about that, that would be a really good introduction.
Yeah, so I'm Lucy. I'm currently going into my third year at the University of Exeter. And like Claire said, I run the blog Lucy Does Law. I've had this for over a year now, and getting close to around 6,700 follower mark. So grown a community over the last year, which is really great. And it's kind of become a little kind of side job for me as well. So it's really great to see that develop too. In terms of my career, I've just finished having 2 virtual vacation schemes with Magic Circle firms, which obviously wasn't the plan. If you asked me this time last year, I was meant to be in the office for 5 weeks, but I've had lots of virtual experience now. So I'm currently going through that whole recruitment process leading up to what I hope will be a training contract offer.
Amazing. And there's 2 kind of threads I want to talk to you about there, but I'm going to tackle the blog first. So what actually inspired you to start the blog?
So when I was in my first year at Exeter, I had no idea what entering law was going to be like. I genuinely thought that you would leave uni with a law degree and you'd be a lawyer and you just kind of like walk into a firm and start lawyering. Like start.
I felt like that too, actually, I must say.
I had no idea like the LPC was a thing, and I kind of found that out and I was like, oh, okay, this is another step after law school. And then I went to a networking evening with a Magic Circle firm and I was just like, I couldn't believe how competitive it was. I just suddenly thought, whoa, why did no one tell me this during my A-levels when I kind of said, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a lawyer. No one said, oh, do you know, it's actually kind of hard to actually like become one. So I kind of thought, okay, I need to tell people about this. So in April, before my first year exams, when I was getting a lot of questions from my old sixth form from people saying, oh, I want to come and study law at uni, what's it like? I thought, okay, well, I need to be telling people what it's actually like outside of just the sixth form that I went to. So I created my blog to kind of document that experience and just kind of widen knowledge and accessibility into what it's like being a law student, how to navigate networking, how to navigate the career path. And I'm still going through it now, which I think makes my blog stand out amongst others because I am literally a current student. I share absolutely everything that I'm doing. So it's just kind of to create that support and to kind of just widen information about what it's actually like in reality.
Yeah, amazing. And I really resonate with all of the things you said there, because the same with me. I was kind of like, okay, I quite like politics and I quite like kind of like the infrastructure of politics. I really enjoyed that kind of side of things at school. And then it's kind of like, oh, maybe you could go and do law. I was really kind of pushed towards that thing because you're guaranteed a job. Are you? And then I kind of was plodding through my uni degree and then realized that you weren't guaranteed a job and that it was incredibly competitive. And even like for myself, I was always like, I'm going to go and work in London. I studied at Aberdeen, so I studied Scottish law. Like nobody told me that, it was actually a different thing. So maybe a little bit of foresight was kind of needed on my part there. But I think many people, are entering university just kind of like, this is what I'm going to do, having seen Suits or whatever else has inspired people. So yeah, I think it's phenomenal. And do you think having the blog has helped you navigate as well, because you're having to kind of overtly kind of think and kind of consciously think about what the next step is for you and making that very public? Or is it just been something that you think has been a useful resource for other people?
I think it has been useful for me as well. I think, the content that I put out there, it is what I'm doing on the daily. I'm not kind of thinking, oh, I need to do this because I've put it on my blog that I'm doing this. But I think in some aspects, it has helped me keep focused on my aspirations and on my studying as well, because I post a lot of revision tips and study tips. I think, you know, if I'm filming a day in my life and I know that, you know, I want this to be a productive study video, I've got to study on that day that I'm filming, because that's the whole point of the content. So I think in some aspects it has like kept me motivated, definitely, in terms of my university life and my career life. But I also do want it to just be like a natural resource for people as well. I don't overthink what I put out there. I never do anything just for the Instagram, like, because my Instagram is just me. So, you know, there's no point faking anything. I'm not about that, but it definitely keeps me on track for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, social media wasn't a thing when it wasn't a thing, it wasn't invented. It was invented, just to confirm, I'm not that old, but it wasn't really, you know, using LinkedIn or having a blog, having a website was definitely not a thing when I was making, you know, job applications. And do you feel that it's a positive, or do you ever feel kind of that you need to do it, or do you ever feel quite exposed? Like, where do you kind of sit with that? Because I think a lot of people are maybe actually reluctant to put themselves out too much because they're scared that actually they might do something wrong. Do you feel that it's always been a positive, or is there any areas that you kind of actually, you know, worry about?
I think you definitely need to strike a balance. There have been some times, especially like this time last year, the whole Instagram blog legal thing just didn't exist. There were like, I would say around 20 people who were kind of documenting their experiences on Instagram, and then it slowly grew and grew, and then over lockdown it just got massive, because I think more law firms started using Instagram, more like legal organizations started using Instagram as a marketing tool, so suddenly everyone kind of jumped on this platform. And I do think you need to be careful. There have definitely been times where I've thought about putting a post up and then thought, oh, hold on, like if a partner from a law firm reads this, what are they going to think about this? Are they going to think this is someone we need to employ? So yeah, I do think you need to be careful, but also it needs to be genuine. Like, there's no point having this Instagram account and trying to target employers. It's not going to come across well, and it's never going to work in your favor, you know. I think it's, you know, it's important to see the full person. I'm very conscious of never sharing just law on that account, but also conscious at the same time that if I mention my blog in an interview or on an application, the chances of them going and looking at it are very, very high. And they have, in fact. I went for an interview in January and they said to me, oh, I had a read through your blog before you came in. So you've got to be so careful about what you're putting online. So it's definitely a consideration to have, but I don't think it's ever substantially impacted what I put out there, because I think when I started my blog, it was just for law, and that's what it's there for. I have another private account to document the other things that I do in my life that aren't kind of career focused. So I do think it's about striking a balance, but making sure that you're still genuine the whole way through.
Yeah, no, definitely. I really agree with you there. And I think that's really interesting to get that kind of insight. Do you think it's actually benefited you in terms of when you're in interviews to have this presence, that it gives you something a little bit more to speak about?
Yeah, definitely. I have used it, because I think for me, my blog has grown to include paid for opportunities. So I now operate it as, you know, a little business, and, you know, it generates income for me. And that's something really interesting to talk about with partners who may not know that much about kind of the influencer sphere. I hate to use the word influencer, but that kind of area where you've like developed a small business for yourself. I think it's really great to talk about. It shows your initiative. And, you know, it's great for diversity and inclusion as well. That is one of the reasons I set it up, was to, you know, to increase the amount of knowledge that's out there about studying law, to support other people. I'm in a very privileged position at Exeter University, where I have a lot of resources, I have a lot of networking opportunities. Some people don't have that. So I think, you know, it's always good to support those people, and also talk about that in interviews, and think about the firm's diversity initiatives and how you've been helping contribute to that as well. So I think there are lots of ways that a blog can help you in an interview, definitely.
Yeah. And have you got any tips for anyone who's maybe thinking about setting up their own blog, or, you know, being more active on either Instagram or LinkedIn? What would be your kind of guidance on that? Whether
Yeah,
they're kind of a student or whether they're maybe already in the legal sphere, is there anything that you've learned that is just like, yes, invaluable?
I think you have literally got to be yourself. Do not pretend to be anyone else when you're putting information out there, and also only speak in the capacity that you actually have knowledge about. So if you haven't secured a training contract yet, don't start putting out posts on how to secure a training contract, because it's not genuine advice, and you never know who's going to read it and think, oh, this is the way I can become successful, see it as a blueprint, and then it might not work out for them, and you could face backlash about that, but also, you know, you're not really in a position to be able to talk about that in the first place. So I think you've always got to have those considerations in mind. But to grow kind of a successful community, I think it's about working out kind of what your USP is, who are you targeting. And I always think when I write a blog post, okay, I'm just going to pretend this is a conversation with a friend, and that's my style of writing. So I almost pretend that a first year has said to me, oh, Lucy, I don't know how to pass the Watson Glaser, and I'm just said, okay, here's how you do it. It's not formal, because that's not who I am. I'm a 20-year-old law student. I'm not going to write some formal legal article. So I think it's kind of working out your style, and hopefully that will kind of help it grow because it's unique to you.
And do you ever feel, I think that's such good advice and such good tips. And I think as well that some people are almost a little bit scared to kind of be themselves in case, you know, a law firm reads it and then is like, oh no, that's not the person for us. But I think, you know, interviews is a two-way process, isn't it? Like, you know, that yes, you as the interviewee are always a little bit on the back foot, but you also do want to make sure you're going with the right person, you know, the right firm for you. So I think actually people getting a feel of your personality isn't ever really a bad thing, because the last thing you want to do is end up at a firm and then find out like it's just completely incompatible with who you are as a person. Which seems like a very luxurious thing to say, you know, at the moment when obviously there's a lot of competition and there's a lot of you know, it's a very difficult industry and difficult market. But I do think that if you are going on for that kind of sustainable success, you do always have to be quite true to who you are.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, if you're pretending to be someone else online and a firm has taken that impression of you, and then you get to an interview and you're not that person, they're also going to be like, well, what's happened here? Because, you know, online she's like, oh, law, she does all this stuff, but in person she doesn't quite match up with that. So you've always got to be yourself, because they can see straight through people. Like graduate recruitment, they're trained to hire people. They know exactly, you know, how to read you in and out. So you definitely have to be cautious about it. And I think the recruitment processes that I've been through, what I've learned the most is that they are looking for the person. I've hardly been asked about any legal stuff in any of my interviews. They really are looking for someone they can get along with. And so, yes, it's really important to be yourself, because if you can get along with them as yourself in the interview, chances are you can get along with a lot of people inside that firm as well. So it can only benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, hugely. I think that's really, really good advice again. Very insightful, aren't you? And the thing I was going to ask you there as well is obviously at the moment you're going through, you know, you do share everything, and you're even sharing the fact that you've done 2 vacation schemes. And do you ever feel like a bit of a conflict thinking like, oh my God, what if I don't get them? Or what if you know, I'm going to have to turn down one, or I've been really open about this. Does that ever feel slightly uncomfortable?
Yes, definitely. It comes with
Your face.
yeah, for sure.
Head there.
It's just because I've never seen anyone document this before. So there are obviously a lot of people who have got positions in the legal industry who kind of document them after they've received them and talk about their process to getting them and can talk about what they're doing right now. But I haven't seen anyone, and there might be people out there, but I haven't seen people say, okay, I've got these 2 vacation schemes, I'm going to film them and put them out there, and then what happens next? Like I still do not know how I'm going to cross that bridge. I could literally get rejected from both. Like a question that always crosses my mind is, if I put one firm out there and then the other firm sees it, what are they going to think? So it's kind of like balancing out the 2. And like, what if I don't get either? Then I've really publicly said I've been to these 2 firms, been rejected from both, and then any future applications, you know, they might look at that Instagram account and think, well, hold on, well, why did these 2 firms reject her? Maybe we don't want to hire her. So it's a huge risk, and it is quite scary. But at the same time, like for me, I set up my blog to increase this knowledge, and I am in a very privileged position where I have had permission to film and daily document 2 vacation schemes with Magic Circle firms. Like, what an incredible insight for a lot of my followers. So I'm very confident that putting them out there is the right thing to do. I just hope it kind of pays off. But obviously there are always risks with putting yourself out there, and I think this is a big one that it's always a grey area for me, because I've never seen anyone do it before, so it's quite intimidating.
Yeah, definitely. But I do think that honesty and that kind of openness really does kind of help, you know, see you through in the long run. So I'm sure it'll work out amazingly. And the other thing I really wanted to talk to you about is comparison amongst your peers? Because, you know, for most people, if they looked at your like LinkedIn page, your bio, it's like you've got this really successful blog, you're president of the Law Society in Exeter, you're head of communications for Grow Mentoring as well, which I'm sure we'll touch upon at some point. But even you said when we had, you know, a chat before the call, that you often find yourself comparing to yourself to others. And I just wondered, why do you think this is? And you know, if you're thinking it, what is everyone else thinking?
I think it's because now with social media, just everything is so public. Like when someone gets a training contract offer, normally like you just wouldn't know unless you knew them in person. But now it comes straight up on your LinkedIn timeline, like as a reminder, like, oh, you haven't got this yet, but this person has. And like before this whole social media surge, that would have never been a thing. And I think with law Instagrams as well, it's almost just amplified this pressure to secure roles. And I think, you know, if it didn't exist, if you didn't see people getting rejected or getting accepted, you kind of just wouldn't really know that the whole process is competitive. You'd submit your applications, go to the firm, and you get it or you wouldn't. You wouldn't have this whole huge pressure and, you know, influence of other people around you. And I think that's where comparison culture has really come in. I think the reason you compare yourself to others is because you always feel like, you know, if they've done a role and they've ticked certain boxes, you think, okay, well, if I tick these boxes, I also have a good chance of getting this role. So you almost try and mimic what they're doing, which sounds really bad because you always need to be yourself, but it's so easy on social media when you can see someone's experience and be like, okay, well, they've got in-house experience, so I should go and get in-house experience as well, because that's obviously helped them get to where they are today. So I think that's kind of just fed into this huge comparison. I think it's really natural as well, but I think it's almost the competitive nature of law plus social media just drives it forward.
And plus the kind of people that are entering the legal industry, you know, you don't get to study law if you're not driven, if you're not ambitious. You know, it's like there's a lot of steps before you actually get to, you know, the point that you're making applications that kind of tie into this as well, I'm sure. And I'm sure many people think that about you. You know, they're looking going, okay, well, she's got a blog and she's got 2, you know, vacation schemes, Magic Circle law firms. Maybe that's what I need to do. I need a blog, and feeling quite overwhelmed by it. Is there anything you would say to people, you know, that are maybe feeling that way, comparing themselves to others, whether it's you or whether it's, you know, someone else that has done X, Y, and Z, and therefore it looks like on paper that's why they got their training contract?
Yeah, I would say everyone's only human, so don't never look at people and think, oh, they've done amazingly at absolutely everything, because nobody's perfect. And I would also say when you're looking at someone's LinkedIn, when you're looking at their Instagram, take everything with a pinch of salt. Like, yes, it's good advice and it's great to see and it's great to form that community, but what people don't share on LinkedIn are the hours that they've spent at their desk to achieve a first grade, or, you know, all the rejections that they had to in order to get the acceptance at the end. So I would just say you've got to just be so careful. Like if you're scrolling through an Instagram that's dedicated to law, often that's what the platform will just be showing, simply because that is the brand, that is the target. It's about law. What you're not seeing is the day-to-day life of that person. So I think you've just got to be really careful. Like, you never know if someone's, you know, had 10 rejections to get that one acceptance. So yeah, I just think take everything with a pinch of salt and just go in with your eyes open. If you see a platform that's only writing about applications and successful ones, brilliant, but they probably know how to do that because they got rejected from some. So, you know, everyone's human, it's all a learning experience, and that goes for people on LinkedIn and Instagram as well.
Yeah, amazing. Again, such good such good insight and such good advice. And I must say as well, you know, I think with social media, yes, there's that extra level of comparison. But even when I was training, you know, I remember looking at people around me, and especially because I wasn't kind of, you know, I studied at Aberdeen. I was the first in my family to go to uni, you know, the usual sub story. But no, I was a slightly different cut from maybe what I expected or what you envisage Magic Circle trainees to be. And I think that's definitely changed over the last like 15, 20 years. But I think traditionally it was very like Oxford, Cambridge, privately educated. And like that wasn't me in any shape or form. That wasn't my background. And I beat myself up about that quite a lot before I joined the firm, more than when I was actually there, and realized that actually there was such a diverse bunch of people. But there were still times when I'd look at other people and be like, oh, maybe I should be doing that, or maybe I'm not going to get this because of X, Y, and Z. So I think, yes, the social media, it it leads us even more heavily to comparing ourselves. But I think there's always an element of comparison. And if you can get past that and you can be confident that you're doing the best that you can do to your best ability, there's so much kind of like mental kind of stability in that, or fulfillment and kind of contentment, rather than constantly looking at other people and thinking I should do this, this and this. And I must say that it's something over the last probably, I don't know, like 3 years, I've got much better at just sitting and going, actually, that's never going to be my thing. Like a lot of the intake, we were just speaking, about the partners at Slaughter May in your kind of interviews and your vacation scheme that you had. And a lot of the people that I trained with are qualifying now, being made up as partners. And I remember initially being a bit like, should I be bothered about this because I've not gone on and done that? And then I thought, no, that was never meant for me. That was never going to be my thing. You can beat yourself up about everything, can't you? But also I think you have to have a certain element of like stability and certainty that what you're doing is the right thing for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, it's a change of mindset. So rather than saying, oh, she's done this, like I really need to do this, oh, that's why she's so successful, actually taking a step back and saying, she's had this amazing work experience, like I'm so happy for her, like what an amazing achievement to do that, like that's going to be so useful for her, and like that's great, she's done so well, but I'm also doing really well because I'm doing this and she hasn't done this. So I think it's kind of, rather than saying, oh no, like look at what they're doing, you look at it and say, oh wow, that's amazing, or like they're doing amazing things, but so am I. And like just reframe it as in a positive mindset, and I think in terms of comparison that can be really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I had to do with the kind of partner thing. I was like, oh my God, all these people are being made up of partners. And I left law, and it's like, yeah, and you set up your own company and it's successful. Like, what is why are you doing this? So I think that's such good advice for people, that you do have to kind of turn it on its head and think, what am I doing? Because it's easy to focus on maybe the 5% that's not perfect in our lives. And the 95% that's good, we just kind of throw to the side, and it's like, oh no, but I should be doing this as well. So yeah, I think that's really, really great advice. And I was going to ask you a little bit as well, that you're involved with Grow Mentoring. I actually interviewed Justin. I think it must have been a couple of months ago now. Actually, it was just kind of at the surge of when Grow was really growing. Sorry, that was not intended, and that was. But it was just when it was starting to really kick off. So how did you end up getting involved with Grow Mentoring? Because I believe that you didn't actually really know Justin before, did you?
No, I never met Justin in real life, but we had brief chats on Instagram mainly, I think. And then he founded Grow, which I just thought looked absolutely amazing. And obviously, like the people who are mainly working behind Grow are trainee lawyers, so they're really, really busy. And he kind of appreciated that, like I can put together graphics on Instagram and do little things like that. So he kind of said, oh, are you happy to do some posts for us and kind of take charge of the Instagram? It was kind of a slow introduction to Grow because I was doing my exams as it was being set up. But slowly I kind of took the reins of the Instagram a little bit. I mean, it is very much a team effort. So, I never want to like big myself up as part of a team, but like I kind of design the Instagram posts, and we all kind of work on the captions together, and I put them up. And if you go into the Grow DMs, like chances are I might probably answer it and kind of forward you to the relevant places, and just kind of, we've recently run an event and I kind of helped behind the scenes of that. So it's just,
it was completely, the number of people you had on that was phenomenal, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, really good. It's been really exciting for me, I think, to take my kind of experience on a personal Instagram and transform it into this legal mentoring, diversity and inclusion based page. It's really fun. I'm still kind of learning like what works well and what doesn't work well. But yeah, I do a lot of social media work for Grow, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Good, amazing. And do you think, have you been speaking about that in your interviews as well?
So because I actually only really got on board with Grow in June, I haven't really had the chance to speak about it yet. I mean, if ever the opportunity comes up, then obviously I'm more than happy to talk about it, because I think it's a great mentoring initiative and I'm really fortunate to be in the team working behind it. But I haven't had the chance yet, so I'm just waiting for one to come up.
Just shout that out there now. Anyone, this is what she does. And I mean, that leads me on to my next point, that is, how do you find the balance to do all of this? Because you're studying, doing vacation schemes, you're involved in Grow Mentoring, you've got your own blog, president of the Law Society. how? Like, I feel knackered just even reading that all out, to be honest.
I know. I think this summer my commitments have gone absolutely crazy, and that is one thing I was asked in an interview. Actually, they kind of said, you're doing so much, how are you actually controlling this? And a lot of it has started this summer. So I think I was being approached with various opportunities during my exam season, and I really wanted to focus on my exams. So I was saying, email me in June, get back to me in June, get back to me in June. And then, everything came in June, and I was like, yeah, that's fine, all fine, all fine. And then I realized that I was doing like 50 million things. So I had to really quickly adapt to a routine, because I used to spend hours sat at my desk on my laptop, replying to an email, doing this post, quickly turning this around for different people. And it was so consuming. It took over so quickly. Like, I didn't realize how many hours it would take me in a day. And I really had to take a step back and think, okay, like, the messages, like on my own personal blog, I get about 80 messages a day from people. It is insane. It unmanageable almost. So I kind of need to think, okay, well, people don't need to reply straight away. If they've asked you for for application advice, they can wait a couple of days for that. Nothing is urgent unless it literally has to be turned around within the next hour, and kind of messages like that don't need to be. So I think it's a case of prioritization. And recently, I've worked on streamlining all my content processes. So whether that's spending 5 hours creating all the graphics for posts, creating all the captions, and having that planned out for the next 3 weeks. It's just about like I think for me it's concentrating my hours and then having more hours off, rather than being like, oh, there's an email to reply to, oh, create this graphic, oh, create this caption. It's actually doing it all in a specific space of time, and then getting it all done, and then you can relax. So I think that's kind of how I've worked out how to manage everything, but it's still an evolving process.
Yeah, of course. And I love that, and I think that's such an invaluable skill set for when you actually join as a trainee, because you will soon learn. You're doing your bit of work and someone's like, could you just do this, it'll just take you 30 minutes, and you're like, A, I'm in the middle of something, B, that's never going to take me 30 minutes, it might take you 30 minutes, and you end up being really overwhelmed and stressed out because you're being pulled in so many different directions. And actually being able to have that acknowledgement that, yes, it's good to be responsive, and especially if something's urgent, but also having the kind of realization that if you end up working like that constantly, you're not being focused, you're not being present on your work, you just end up feeling absolutely exhausted. And I love that you said that about the messages, because I get quite a lot of messages as well from trainees, lawyers, anybody, whether it's career change that they want, whether it's kind of resilient support, or whether it's just something's going on that we've been speaking about in the blog, and they'd love, my take, on the podcast, you're the blog, I've got the podcast, whether it's something like that. And I did used to always feel like, oh my God, I need to respond to this person. And then I've realized now, like, I kind of almost set aside some time on a Friday, and it's like all that stuff, I just am like, okay, right, I've got an hour, I'm going to respond to all those little bits that I haven't done. And it makes me feel much better, because I think it's so easy to get into the habit as well of saying, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm only getting back to you now, or sorry. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's a case of, this was a time that was convenient for me to really sit down and respond to that person, therefore that's what I'm going to do. And I know that when you're working in the legal industry, that's not always possible, but kind of like realizing how much of your mental energy is taken away when you're multitasking and how unproductive you're being, it's worth stepping back and just thinking, actually, how am I going to schedule my day and how am I going to look at it? So I think you've kind of taught yourself some invaluable skills before even, entering the formal corporate environment.
Yeah, you're so right. I also have like the same kind of hour. I call it my power hour. I have it on like a Saturday where I'll just like sit down and I'll just like respond to like all the messages in one go and get them all out of the way. And like, it's kind of the same with emails as well. Like whenever I get an email, I'd think this, sometimes I get emails from people who are, way above me in life, people who are in charge of businesses or that kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, they need a reply straight away because, I'm just a third year law student. But I think actually they're probably not going to get back to that reply for another 2 days. So why am I rushing for them when I know they also probably won't rush for me? So I think it's just kind of having that mindset, flagging the email and thinking, okay, I'll come back to this later and give it a detailed reply. And if they don't reply for 2 days, it's fine because I haven't rushed a reply in 15 minutes. So yeah, I think that change in mindset has been really useful to help me balance things.
Yeah, and I think that often actually when you, and this is actually something I was speaking with a law firm about a couple of months ago when we were talking about the main challenges. and that their trainees face. And one thing they said was that they are so keen to respond straight away that sometimes they don't actually think about it. And if they'd sat on it a little bit longer, like it's good to be shown, you know, oh yeah, no, I was at my computer, like I got back to you straight away. But sometimes you're maybe asking questions that didn't need to be asked, or you could have found additional information if you just had kind of sat on it and gave it an hour or so and then thought, oh, I know what they're talking about. I did that last week or whatever. So I do think that there's so many benefits just kind of just taking a step back and breathing and thinking, right, okay, I'm gonna when the time, you know, when the time's right. Amazing. And I was going to say as well that I had another question for you, and it's gone off my top of my head there. I was thinking, do you think that training, you know, the applications are more competitive nowadays than they maybe were kind of a couple of years ago, especially with the amount of people that are, you know, exposed or kind of showing themselves on social media in whatever capacity that might be? Have you kind of felt that's made you kind of feel like you've got to work even harder for one, or do you think it's kind of muchness?
It's hard to say because I haven't had experience applying a couple of years ago, so I'm not really sure. Not like I'm saying back then makes it sound like it was years ago, but like I'm not really sure like how it was like. So I can only speak from my experience, but we've seen, for example, Shoesmiths as a law firm really have increased their social media usage on Instagram, Facebook Lives, YouTube videos, I think as well. And they received a record number of applications this year. And maybe it's because when you see a firm on Instagram, they seem so much more approachable. Like, you know, especially with top firms, Magic Circle firms, if you see them posting on Instagram, posting Instagram stories, you think, oh, there are just normal people working in this firm. Maybe I can work there too because they seem pretty normal. Like they're on Instagram, I'm on Instagram, you know, you're on the same wavelength. So I think definitely they seem more approachable, and potentially that could increase the amount of applications they get. I think Shoesmith is a good example of how that has happened. Obviously, I'm not sure. Maybe the kind of application numbers were just more hidden when social media wasn't a thing. I think law's always been a competitive career from the get-go. I don't think social media has made it more competitive, but maybe has it amplified the amount of applications? Potentially.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just think this kind of culture of using social media in applications is just something that was completely unheard of, you know, before. And I think it's an additional step for people to navigate, because they almost feel like if they are on social media, they need to do it a certain way, or they're concerned that maybe, you know, people's perception of them, if they're not, then they need to feel maybe that they've got to justify why they're not. So it's a really tricky balance that I think, you know, you're doing really, really well. So thank you so much for sharing your, you know, story today.
I would also just add to that, I think you don't have to be on social media to get a training contract at all. You know, I think, you know, the people who were on my VAC schemes, none of them knew that I had this Lucy Does Law platform. None of them were kind of in this Instagram world. And I think, oh, how sometimes I was like, oh, how nice must that be to kind of not be aware of this huge competitive world that's out there on your Instagram feed. But like, just for people who might be listening to this and thinking, oh my gosh, I need to start an Instagram page to get into this legal world, you really don't. Like, if it's for you, it's for you. Like, I love blogging, I love writing things, I love sharing things with people. I think, you know, I just enjoy it. You know, I had motivations to set up the blog in the first place. Like, don't just set it up because you want to put it on an application. It's not worth it. Focus your energy in other places. Like, yeah, it's just, you know, if you're trying to tick a box, like, it's not going to work, because, you know, blogging is not a box they're looking for when they're assessing you. Like, yes, it's useful if you're passionate about it and you enjoy it, but don't do it for the sake of it, because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think that's such good insight and such good advice. So I always finish off the podcast with a couple of questions. So the first one I wanted to ask you was, what does resilience mean to you?
I think resilience means being strong when you're faced with a challenge. I think everyone has challenges to overcome, and I think the way you overcome them shows a lot more about you than the actual challenge itself. So I think that process of actually thinking, okay, I've got a hurdle to cross here. Resilience measures how you cross that hurdle and how you get to the other side.
Yeah, amazing. That's such a good answer. And the other thing I wanted to ask was, what does sustainable success mean to you in terms of, sustainable success in the, you know, the legal industry is always what we're talking about at Leading Minds and what the podcast is really aimed around. And is there any tip that you have for sustainable success in the legal industry, bearing in mind that you're at the student end, I'm aware, so I'm not asking for, you know, but you know, what have you found so far that is something that's helped you find that sustainable success?
I think what's helped me is knowing what I want to do and being happy with that choice. I think it's very easy, speaking from like my student experience so far, to feel very pigeonholed into going into the top city commercial law firms. And if that's not for you, it's not for you, and that's not going to be sustainable for you. If you try and enter it and then start your training contract and realize, I'm so out of depth here, I'm working long hours and I don't actually enjoy the work. So I think for me, sustainable success is working out what you actually want to do, mapping out how you can get there and following that path. If that's a big city firm, then great. But like if it's not, that's also great, and you'll have sustainable success in the career you want to go down. So I think it's not being pigeonholed into, you know, where university might be pushing you into, and to actually doing what you enjoy.
Yeah, and I think that's such good advice, because I do think it's easy to think that, you know, oh, but I only went to one of the smaller firms, therefore, you know, it kind of feeling like you got to justify it. I don't think you ever need to justify it. I think you need to figure out what feels right for you based on a number of different, you know, circumstances and factors, and then going for it. And again, it goes back to that comparison, doesn't it? That you're kind of almost kind of looking at, right, this is my decision, I'm going to stick with it. And yeah, there's always going to be flexibility, there's always going to be change within that decision, within that journey, but not feeling that you're less than because someone else has done something a different way, or questioning constantly whether you should also be doing that. I think it's really good. And my final question for you, sorry, I'm throwing them at you today, is who do you find inspiring within the legal industry and think would be a great guest on the podcast?
Oh, that is a curveball question.
I give people a heads up. I feel like I did not give you a heads up, and I do apologize.
I was not expecting that one.
Oh, okay.
I can't come up with an answer. I think the people, I'm going to give a generic answer that's not just one person. I think the people that I find inspiring and that I like to hear about are people who are relatable and who have overcome challenges or doing something different. I think it's very easy to just kind of go through life, do the traditional route and do it successfully. And some people do that, and kudos to them. Like, you know, they've obviously are very successful people. But I'd like to be inspired from people who are either similar to me or people who are just doing something different, and they've used that difference to make them successful. So that is who I would like to hear from.
And that's what I hope the podcast is about, that I do try and do that. That actually so far, I don't think we've had anyone that's actually gone down the traditional route. It's always been people who've maybe had slightly alternative career paths, or who's done something extra that's just been, you know, phenomenal. So hopefully there'll be more episodes coming your way soon that you'll enjoy. But thank you so much for joining me today. I think so many people are going to find, you know, your story really inspiring, really insightful, and you've gave such great advice today that I am sure, you know, whatever vacation scheme ends up picking you, you're going to be flying with it.
Oh, thank you so much. I love the podcast, so thank you.
Amazing. Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoy it. And to anyone listening to the podcast, I just wanted to say, you know, if you want to be kept up to date with weekly episodes, please subscribe on the Leading Minds website. That's leadingmindsglobal.com/podcast.com. You can have a look, you know, on that, subscribe, and you'll have weekly episodes straight to your inbox. And also follow us on LinkedIn as well, so that you get that top tips for sustainable success every Tuesday, and the podcast launched every Thursday. So thank you so much, Lucy. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day, and thanks everyone for joining us as well.
Thank you.